Good morning and good evening to audience joining us from different parts of the world. Thank you for joining us in our webinar, BPO Beyond Cost Arbitrage. My name is Karthik. I handle global marketing for Prodapt and I will be the host for today's evening. Today we have with us Prakash Ramakaimal, who is our VP of Telecom Operations and Process. He will be the speaker for the presentation and he's also the head of the Telecom Operations Practice at Prodapt. Prakash comes with more than 17 years of experience working in the process outsourcing domain for global organizations. He's also a certified Six Sigma Lean Black Belt practitioner and a quality auditor. Quickly about the format of the event. As promised, we will have a 30-minute presentation from Prakash about our best practices and Prodapt's approach to business process outsourcing. This will be followed by 15 minutes of question and answer session. The audience can type in their questions. If they have any questions during the course of the presentation, you can type in your questions through the chat window that you will find to the right hand side of the screen. That's it from my side, and I request Prakash to take over.
Thanks, Karthik. Warm welcome to all. Just moving on to the slide. Telecom outsourcing market is today around $50+ billion and growing at a rate of 7% annually, which is a testimonial to how service providers have chosen outsourcing as a key ingredient to their overall strategy of business objectives. In this line, what we plan to achieve is to discuss points around Prodapt, key few drivers for telecom outsourcing, and when we outsource, what could be hidden challenges, what is Prodapt's optimization model that could help mitigate those challenges, and some case study to illustrate. Prodapt is a part of 120+ old organizations spread across the globe with 13,000 employees in 60 offices. Specific to Prodapt, we operate in India, US, Europe, and South Africa. Our clientele is spread across Fortune 500 global CSPs, ISP, and NEMs. Telecom industry, we have seen a radical shift in the way outsourcing is done. Gone are the days when it was considered to be a mere labor arbitrage saving exercise or mere call-based support outsourcing. In order to maintain a $50 million business and continue to grow at a pace of 7% Y-on-Y year-on-year, a method to madness needs to exist. While all this listed coexists during consideration of outsourcing, we will discuss in detail next couple of slides. Cost savings to value. In our recent conversation with our potential client, we were explaining on the benefits of how skilled manpower and cost of 35 to 40% will reduce their total cost of order to activate process. Believe me, it was much attractive than other vendors. This proposal did not progress. The question was, this is the market now. Can we talk about mode? What mode can bring to the table and be your differentiator? And further, even if you suggest a lift and shift model, what do you think can be the future process look like? How will that improve my overall quality and end customer experience? The next one is non-code to code. For example, in order to activate cycle, predominant vendors exist around order entry processes, which requires them to enter basic information of a product, wireline, wireless, cable, to an order entry system, referring to multiple legacy silo systems. Or processes which require data migration moving from one system to other. None of these had mandated or demanded telecom knowledge. Pure data entry skills would suffice. The shift is towards service providers willing to let away core network processes in order to leverage vendor skills on domain and also enable them to improve time to market. The other interesting factor is about alternate pricing models. In a typical service organization, the cost per order is mostly measured per unit or output than the effort put in to deliver the product. Outsourcing industry is also maturing to this fact And most of the clients are insisting the vendors to provide alternate models than traditional time and effort method. For example, in order to activate process, it's price per order. For collection process, it's total outstanding collected and percentage of profit shared to the vendor. For billing process, maintain threshold levels of errors was payment made to that effect. The complexity and the value is high as we go up the value chain of pricing, while most of the outsourcing starts with an effort-based model. As the process matures, they move to a transactional or an outcome-based pricing. The other factor is about unstructured to structured. From the time to roll out from RFPs to decide on vendor, the time cycle of some varies from 6 to 9 months, even more, driven by the fact that third-party trusted advisors are playing a big part of decision-making process by removing subjectivity and bringing best-in-class solutions to the provider. Some of the parameters that are also considered are cultural alignment, legal statutory requirements, willingness to transfer ownership of assets post-contract, which we build during the contract, year-on-year productivity improvement, and most interestingly, joint solution workshop with key vendors, which they decide on the vendor list. And this is far from what initial days of outsourcing were. While we talked about how mature the market has evolved towards outsourcing, there are still noises created around transitioning the process or running as effectively as or even better than the service providers. So what are the challenges? Why do we seem to be overlooking at these? We'll elaborate in the next couple of slides. Before that, I would like to hand over to Karthik for a quick polling on audience view on pitfalls. Over to you, Karthik.
Thank you, Prakash. To the audience, we have a small interactive poll coming up. You can take 20 to 30 seconds to answer the question that you'll see on the screen. Once you answer the question, we can go on to publish the results and we can go on with the presentation. All right, so let's see the results of the survey. That's interesting. Which, in your opinion, is a major pitfall while outsourcing? And we have about 50% of the audience answering ineffective transition planning, and the rest 50% answering for transfer of relevant knowledge to the vendor. So it's interesting. Don't you think,
Yeah,
Prakash?
we never experienced a 50-50% on both the variables. But also interesting to look at, none of them choose for buy-in from individual stakeholders before outsourcing. I'm going to touch about this point in the next slide. It's pretty interesting that most of the time when we do outsourcing, this point is left out. Maybe that's your experience, but would like to talk about it in the next couple of slides. See, if you look at the pitfalls, I'm going to definitely talk about those 3 points, also talking about change. Change is constant, and in telco world, this is getting driven with multiple factors on as known. External changes could be 5G, 4G replacing 3G, fiber replacing copper, multiple consolidation at service providers levels, single CRM system to understand customer life cycle. And internal changes, factoring future automation, migration, switching over from legacy systems, acquisition drives marketing, time to time new schemes to attract customers. Question is your vendor in alignment to the changes? Is it forecasted? And if change happens, do we have a system which be achieved through better organization responsiveness? That's where change becomes most critical. The second point to touch upon is about the knowledge which exists, tribal knowledge which exists within the service provider. One of the biggest obstacles of achieving an overall objective of outsourcing, years of experience residing at service providers level and failure to document the knowledge, and that's what which I saw also in terms of 50% of polling. I think that most of them have chosen this option. It clearly shows this is a pain area. The second dimension to is the willingness to transfer. What is in for me? Why should someone take additional effort in transitioning their processes or knowledge? In our recent transition of billing process, we found that at least 20 to 25% of the scenarios went uncaptured during the first phase of knowledge transfer, which resided at some service provider operator level. This covered multiple scheme tariff codes which got discontinued later, but still had existing customers bill packaged to those tariffs, so it was crucial to get it right. Moving to the next one, the operational definition. In a recent survey of 2 service providers claimed #1 position for customer service excellence. Service provider 1 measured excellence by number of complaints received last 1 year by the sub-base and compared the percentage with other service provider. While the service provider 2 measured excellence with survey done for their customers post each complaint log and measured percentage across other service provider. Now, while both could rightfully claim the position, the uniform measurement system does not exist. In outsourcing context, service providers want orders which came for order entry to be completed within 24 hours of receipt. What needs to be added is the operational definition of measurement, which has time of input, cut-off time, working hours, numerator, denominator, etc. Another example, measuring your quality percentage via defect or defective method. While both will give you the quality percentage of reporting, defective method is more stringent way of calculating quality percentage, mostly achieved with experience on process. The last point, again, we talked about this right transitioning, and most of the motive for it is the right transitioning. Most of the outsourcing fail due to wrong plan or right plan with rigorous execution. The amount of time spent to finalize vendor is not spent to ensure seamless execution, or the failure to identify risk at an earlier stage. With our experience, we understand that any process, irrespective of its complexity, can be seamlessly transitioned if it had the right transition plan and governance and handshake between both the entities. There are multiple models to ensure we are on track. In one of our engagements, client had deputed a couple of the management team to be part of the offshoring location for the first initial year or so and tied their performance to vendor performance, creating a true partnership model. There's one thing which I want to touch upon is the internal stakeholder buy-in. Though we did not find any of them voting for it, what we found is that typically the question is, have you experienced roadblocks when your vendor wanted to touch upon the IT system to improve process? Did you come across scenarios where changes are done in the system and that processes which affects the scope handled by your vendor? Silo transitioning of the process without the organizational awareness has created bottlenecks. Is your marketing team, IT team, sales team, or the stakeholders are in sync before you outsource? This, within our experience, it has been a major challenge, and that's why I said it's been interesting to look at the poll. None of them voted it for. The other was on the business case in alignment with Big Why. Is it aligned to the end objective what the service provider envisioned to achieve? It could be faster time to market. It could be increasing revenue through new value-add services. It could be repeat purchases from customer loyalty. Have you mapped the Big Why in terms of outsourcing objectives? Is your vendor aligned with the end objectives what the organization wants to meet? The other one is even more interesting about offshoring bodies than services. I like to call upon an analogy where typical to a plant getting moved and soiled in a different environment. In this condition, we all do consider the support systems available. It could be the soil, it could be the climatic conditions, etc. Similar to this, a process cannot be moved outside the location without considering its support systems. Most of the time, it's done so. For example, in level 1 technical support process movement, Have we mapped and understood the upstream and the downstream process? What is the impact of an error or ineffective resolution at level 1 on the downstream process? What a support system exists for the current process? Have we considered all of them? It's something to ponder upon. So these are some of the pitfalls, not all of them, but some of the pitfalls which we have seen by experience which comes across during transition. So what is our model? What's our process optimization model? The next generation model is built and delivered with an overall experience in outsourcing. Lessons learned while managing multiple service providers' engagements and also alignment of changing industry requirements. We have seen successful transitions by deploying this framework. Before we go on to discuss, I would like again hand over to Karthik for a quick polling. Karthik, over to you.
Thank you, Prakash. We have the second poll for the webinar. We have another 30 seconds for the audience to answer. How optimized is your processes? We have 3 options there. Good. Let's close the window. Now you can see the results on the screen. About 71% of the audience have voted for mature processes to be explored for optimization. To the question, how optimized is your processes? We have about 71% of audience answering mature processes to be explored for optimization, and the rest 29 for optimized processes.
You know what, Karthik, I'm very happy that we're having this session, and most of them have chosen the option 1 of 71%.
We have the right audience for
right audience, exactly. So that's one thing which definitely encourages us to talk about next couple of slides. What model do we have in terms of how do we drive optimization?
Yeah, moving on.
There are 3 phases what we want to talk about. The first phase about creating baseline, managing process lifecycle, and process optimization. So each one we will get into detail, discuss about what we do in each of the spaces. Creating baseline. The first step what we believe in creating is a strong foundation, and a lot of focus from senior management in governing is spent on this to get it right. Some of the basics done during baseline phase. Every scenario process is documented through standard operating procedures. Step by step with screenshots and corresponding flowcharts are prepared to train the team on an ongoing basis. Advantage is that it reduces dependency on service provider to continue support, also reducing the cost of service provider to manage the vendor. Second is its rule-based approach. It gives lesser defects and helps in identifying opportunities for improvement in future. The second thing what we do is calibration of quality checks. We have a scorecard methodology to measure common audit parameters, specifically categorizing critical customer and non-critical customer defects. Joint calibration sessions are driven through repeatability and reproducibility tools. The advantage is that it helps in analyzing frequent errors and take preventive action in alignment with service providers, and is mostly customer focused. Hence, there is no discrepancy in the accuracy scores reported. We talked about operational definition in the previous slides. Each of the SLA KPI parameter documented with measurement criteria. Again, the advantage is that no disputes in measurement, and it's measured on common goals. One view of the process. Business metrics, understanding what is business drivers Is it faster go-to-market, increasing ARPU per customer, better network optimization, helping service provider build a better business case to outsource? Again, advantage is that jointly working towards improvement of business metrics and better partnership model. We saw the pain of transition, ineffective transition. Our robust transition methodology can also be customized to your requirement. Also, a built joint governance mechanism that both the entities sign off on each of the transition phase deliverables. Advantages, of course, no surprise framework, and well begun is after. Moving on, managing process lifecycle. Red Hat has created inbuilt performance management tool to measure agent production and manage incoming volumes. The advantage of this is process managers are enabled on a day-to-day operations. They use this data inputs to improve productivity. Also, understand process challenges on a real-time basis. We talked about change, the previous pitfalls. The structured change control to manage any process, systemic changes that impact production. The process defines as and when a change is required. What is the timeline to analyze impact? Approval required on change, training post-set the team, accrediting the team on the change, and accordingly changes made to the SOP, etc. The advantage is that it enables better learning curve and also up-to-date documentation with less defects. Moving away from our knowledge which resides with the operator, it moves to from a people dependency to a system dependency. Knowledge repository. We have built knowledge repository. This remains as a reference point to any query that might exist with the agent. The advantage is that reduction of queries to service provider on same scenarios, and it remains as a help guide for agents. Our quality management system defines roles, responsibilities, and every process and procedures are listed down on how to run operations. Advantages, it's a predictive and standardized operating model ensuring consistency in output. The governance mechanism is aligned at operational, tactical, and strategic levels. Executive sponsorship is a must on both sides. Again, ensuring across the level responsiveness and connect to work as partners. Moving on with the process optimization. How do we drive process optimization? Typically, a process adds inefficiency due to various factors like legacy system, people inefficiency, multiple levels of authorization, checks, ultimately adding cost to the process, and also delaying the end product to customer. What we do here is to identify the 7 types of wastages which potentially is impacting the overall process cycle time. For example, in a complaint to solution process, there could be multiple movement between the internal stakeholders for information, checkpoints to validate the previous steps, approval levels to move to next stage, waiting time to clarify inputs sent by previous team, working on inefficiencies created by previous team. All of the wastages are identified. Once identified, we could drive efficiency via automation of steps that could add no value or human intervention wherever it's required. Here again, Red Hat uses this depth of telecom knowledge processes and familiarization of IT architecture via its IT arm, which is the biggest advantage what we carry. With our experience in handling multiple geography clientele, the automation and improvements are benchmarked against best in the industry. In order to drive optimization, the need also rises for predictable forecasting volumes. The other point which I want to discuss is pretty interesting, which today it's on the outcome-based input and outcome-based to input process measurements. We call it IPO metrics, input process output metrics. Today's industry is maturing towards a better way to manage the process than to wait for the end results to meet the business objectives SLAs defined. A system also exists to measure the inputs and process along with the output. Similar to a manufacturing industry where each of the parts produced contribute to the overall design and success, we can draw a similar example to our outsourcing world. For example, a billing process is measured on cycle time for bill processing, percentage of accurate bills generated, a turnaround time to resolve billing queries, etc. There is a need also to measure number of bills received, number of people working to bill generation as input measurement, percentage of reworks, measurement within process movements, billing to provisioning team or billing to sales team clarification, etc. This becomes a process measurement. This measurement ensures that we don't end up surprised with end results. An ongoing trend indicator will help us take corrective actions. What we do also different on the optimization is that we cascade this to the process managers level. No more top-down approach on improvements. The first level managers are educated on process measurements and gauged on how well they improve the current process. Each one of them are trained on basic Six Sigma and Lean concepts, so the optimization is driven by bottoms-up approach rather than top-down. The key objective of optimization, to look at, is to drive an ongoing culture within operations, to improve cycle time, reducing defects. While simple automation efforts are driven by the vendor, if you look at the chart on the slide, to have radical changes, we need to have service providers working together with the vendor. Most of the time, outsourcing of process is done in piecemeal, which creates more dependency on provider. For example, one of our order entry process, value stream mapping, we identified overall cycle time increased due to two reasons. One, information gathered from multiple systems. Two, dependency on service provider to do feasibility checks before final submission. Proposal one was to, by deploying screenscaping method, the output was captured in one screen. This not only reduced the overall cycle time, but also reduced the touch points with errors. Proposal two, the recommendation was to add an additional step to the agent to do a feasibility check done by the service provider, which is process consolidation. Though it could reduce overall cycle time by 24 hours, here the decision to consolidate and implement as suggested is governed by service provider. So higher the benefits, the more dependency resides with the service provider. A quick snapshot of what we discussed as a framework of optimization framework, which addresses a common pitfalls and mode as we discussed. Moving on, I want to discuss about a couple of our case studies where we drove optimization from day one. This is one of our US service provider. The process starts from order entry to assign broadband facilities and provisioning. The service provider faced with multiple challenges which delayed in overall cycle time to provision service. Due to internal process inefficiencies built over the years, multiple orders got stuck at various functions and ultimately delayed work orders, which reached the field engineers. Inputs were received from multiple vendors, and managing their performance was an uphill task. Approach was to do faster transition. A screenscaping tool helped to validate inputs from 25 fields and 8 systems, which we built internally, which reduced the cycle time, touch points, and errors. An auto email response replaced the manual efforts of unstandardized and slow email response. Data integrity was maintained through auto reconciliation of customer info from multiple systems. One consolidated and automated MIS reports help having the customer single view of performance across the winter. The benefits are reducing manual efforts through automation and incremental process changes realized a savings of $500K annually. We improved the overall productivity by 40% for this process. Moving on to the next case study, this is again for one of our US service provider. The process is to do pre-bill checks. There was a cascading effect of running irregular audit checks billing cycle, which impacted monthly financial targets in customer satisfaction. The approach was to inventory was consolidated with all the billing codes and corresponding price. This helped in bundling the right package and reducing the overall errors. Auto follow-ups and auto escalation metrics which we built in help resolve queries faster and in a timely manner. Automation and rigor in doing the right packaging help customer achieve financial target of $5 million annually. There was no room for escalation due to billing errors. Across, we had 35% increase in the overall productivity. To conclude, with evolving technologies and demanding customer requirements, the industry is fastly moving towards well-oiled process outsourcing practices, which is powered by mature vendors who are capable of bringing together domain expertise and IT technology support. That's it from me, and once again,
Announcement to the audience before we move on. This is the first webinar in the series of BPO related webinars from ProDapt. Request your participation and support for the forthcoming webinars too. And if the audience do not have any more questions at the moment, I would encourage you to send in your questions to the email ID that you see on the screen. And that is all we have at the moment. If the audience have any more questions as requested earlier, please send in your questions to the email ID that you see on the screen. Thank you again for joining us. Have a nice day.